Good evening, Steve. How are you tonight?
Good morning, Phil. I'm doing really well, thanks. How about you way down on the other side of the world?
Uh, yeah, no, it's interesting down here. We've entered into a 6-week lockdown here just in the Melbourne metropolitan. So, yeah, just means, I suppose, more time in front of my computer. I don't know.
Yeah, our governor here in Michigan just today finally mandated masks. So, everybody's up in arms about, oh my God, it's against my rights and this and that and the other. It's like, put your damn mask on, idiot.
Yeah, well, actually, it's interesting too, because masks has been sort of a same sort of discussions here, and now they're recommending that if you can't social distance in a situation to use masks. So that's quite a change here as well. So for those who don't know, Melbourne is in the state of Victoria. So we run a little bit like US states in that sense. And so the way the rest of the country are treating us at the moment is no one will let us go anywhere in Australia, really. So we're like an island state within a continent at the moment.
Yeah, and in the U.S., most of our states are basically just in a state of confusion. And everyone has different rules, and you can go wherever you want, and God knows what the implications are, right? So
Yeah.
I don't know. It's part of me says it's the flu, and the other part of me says this is a pretty major thing. And all I know is I'm going to wear my mask. I'm going to social distance. I don't want to get this crap. I've heard it's pretty nasty.
Yeah. No, I think safety first. Anyway, that's our COVID discussion. So shall we just finish now and sign off? No, or shall we?
Well, I got to drink my beer, but
Okay.
no, I think, we were going to talk about different approaches for modeling and how many KMATs you should have and why and when and where and things of that nature, right?
Yeah, we were. But I think, as we discussed that, I think we changed our mind now.
Well, we tend to do that every now and then. We in the U.S., we call it running down a bunny trail, right?
Oh, right. Yep.
So when we had this initial conversation, we went down about 18 different bunny trails. And I think we kind of ended up in the fact that, where we are now in the SAP landscape doesn't lend itself to where we want to be in 5 to 7 years.
Yeah.
From how do we present the VC model to the customer on the shop floor?
Yep. So I think we will start with that discussion, and we'll just see where it heads. That at the moment we don't actually have a PowerPoint presentation because it's on the fly. I think what we'll try and do, we'll see if it works, is we will do a share screen so we've got a place to put some graphics or ideas that may pop out of our discussion. I can pop into the video later. So we'll give that a crack and see if that actually works.
Give you some history. If you go out onto the CWG document share back in the 2006 Marco Island presentations, you'll find one by a gentleman named Albert Haag on visions for configuration from SAP. And he talks about how SAP was thinking about splitting the configuration task into multiple sessions. Here we are 14 years later, that never happened. Well, in 2009, a gentleman named Barry Walton had a really good presentation about why you should build your VC model for planning, meaning everything you do should think about planning first. And in 2014, I think it was, a couple of folks from SAP did another presentation in Leipzig on splitting your manufacturing and your sales model. And that's because the IPC knowledge-based download didn't give you a good way to do that. So they showed 3 or 4 different workarounds how you could do that to make the customer-facing experience a good one.
Yeah.
The reason I bring all that up is because, here we are talking about transitioning to the S4 environment and the AVC. And as we've talked about in other videos, that's a pretty big investment. And I think about where we're going to end up. And I keep going over to my neighbors, and every time I'm over there, they're screaming, "Alexa, do this! Alexa, do that!" And I even heard her ordering a purse off of Amazon via Alexa. And I'm thinking to myself, how would I build a VC model to do that?
So what you're thinking of your future self, where you'd like to be with VC, but you'd like to go to somewhere where you could do that and think, oh, I've got this VC in the background of this and making this happen?
Well, yeah, I mean, okay, I come from a furniture world, and I can easily see myself going, SAPEXA, show me a piece of furniture that's between 1 and 3 meters long, and it matches this color swatch that I'm holding up. It brings me my beer, and it costs somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 euros. And behind the scenes, your VC model is crunching through those needs that I just gave you to come up with a KMAT.
So what we're really talking about here is partly a technology pathway that SAP are trying to jump on that train, or perhaps they're on the wrong train. So you see bits and pieces at times. When I look back, and some of the older presentations that you had sort of demonstrate the different emphasis that's happened over the decades with VC, because some of the earlier ones, it was all about, how do we make this stuff? How do we plan it? We're not so concerned about the customer facing side, because way back then there wasn't really a customer facing side. It was often someone in the office entering the data. But now the switch is really gone, customer facing.
I don't normally call specific people out in these videos, but I think Albert Haag deserves a ton of credit, because in 2006 he was already thinking about this stuff. And if you go to the presentation I talk about, you can see how he's splitting it out, and he was so far ahead of his time. But I think, as you and I have talked about, the younger the person, the more they care about the customer-facing interaction, and the less they care about the manufacturing interaction.
That's right. And just, I suppose, on Albert, a lot of people won't know who Albert Haag is.
He was the lead development architect for the Internet Pricing Configurator, the IPC. He's worked, if you Google him, you will be amazed at the number of papers Albert has published on configuration technologies going back many, many, many years. And he's still very active in the SAP landscape. He's just an amazing man that knows the configuration world way better than I do.
Yeah, I know. I've met him a couple of times and talked to him at the conferences when we had them live. Anyway, that's just a little call out to Albert anyway, but we'll get back on track.
Yeah, so, you had brought up the point of, when you call to SAPEXA using your natural language query processor, that the result should be a 3D image, right? And, SAP has some very rudimentary 3D imaging tools today with Visual Enterprise. And I call them rudimentary because I compare them to things like 3Kit or many of the tools that are out there today that do a better job presenting 3D images and configuration, in fact.
To date, with VC, there's never really been an easy path to graphics in general. Even if you want a 2D graphic, nothing sort of easily out of the box. The opportunity for third-party companies and developers to, but even as a simple default offering, there's not much easily obtainable.
Well, you can use the Visual Enterprise to map to your VC model.
Yeah.
But typically what they're asking you to map with are engineering drawings and engineering visuals, because Visual Enterprise is really truly geared at visual routings, for example. And guess what? Nobody out in customer-facing land wants to see those visuals. They're not pretty visuals. And if you use something like 3D Studio Max to make a very pretty visual, there's no easy way to map it back to the SAP model.
Yeah. Yeah.
Plenty of homegrown solutions out there. There are a couple of third-party solutions out there. There's one out of Germany called Intelligent Graphics that does a really good job of it. But that's a German-only enterprise right now. They haven't moved out of Germany, and I don't know if they're going to. But my advice to folks that are looking for 3D graphics is get your head out of the SAP sandbox and look elsewhere.
Because I think I suppose that's where I go back to the point, is that have SAP taken the right directions, leverage this stuff, or is it really going to probably stay in the third-party world, and they'll just provide the connectors and the methods to do that, I suppose?
I get very frustrated with SAP because I've tried to connect them with third parties multiple times for more than 10 years. SAP seems to believe that that should all stay in-house, and yet they don't seem to put any emphasis on it. Every now and then I hear them talk about a 3D graphical configurator. They've shown concept demos of it, but I don't see any real progress on it. Maybe there will be. But, when you come back to what do you do to set up your VC model when you're transitioning from ECC and LOVC to S4 and AVC, my recommendation at this point in time is definitely to look at the roadmap for those items that fall in line with Albert Haag's vision of splitting the configuration tasks. And it's on the roadmap. Keeps moving, but it's on the roadmap. And to hesitate and not do anything until that actually gets delivered in productive software.
Yeah, because what you're talking about there is the separation really of the customer facing and the back end decoupling.
Yeah.
And I suppose that goes back to the initial point where in the early days the focus was on, I suppose, the production end of things. The customer facing wasn't at that stage deemed important, but as time has moved on, it's become more customer facing. And one of the reasons for the decoupling is, regardless of the idea of it, is to improve performance and things like that as well, and cut down unnecessary processing. That just because you choose something that's customer facing that has no direct impact on production, that things trigger all over the place regardless.
Well, and when you throw engineer to order into the mix, it gets even worse. I used to complain to SAP that they needed to do the loose coupling before the engineer to order, and they said no, they're gonna do them the other way around. Fine, it's your software, do what you want. But when you think about how a customer thinks about engineer to order, it's completely different than how a manufacturer thinks about engineer to order. Like, again, if I can't capture that customer requirement, it does me no good on the back end. So again, we come back down to needs-based configuration with visuals, and right now it's just not there.
I think it's interesting times because obviously the technology evolves so quickly. And the interesting thing I find is that like the open source world really pushes some of this stuff as well. Just looking at like 3D, for example, you can go on the web and download, say, a product called Blender, which is a 3D modeling tool. You only have to watch 2 or 3 YouTube videos of what people are doing with that sort of tool in the 3D imaging world, and you sort of think, well, how can that be hooked back to a business application like you're saying? Going back to your furniture example, you talk to your computer, it shows you your lavender chair, then you say, oh, can you just pop it in I want to see how it looks in my lounge.
Augmented reality.
There's a long way to go, and but I think probably all software vendors are grappling with this. Some may be on better technology platforms, perhaps, to make that easier. I think we forget sometimes, like SAP is such a comprehensive piece of software, and like 90% of it is the back end stuff, if you like. 10% of it is probably that front end visual part of it, the customer facing part of it. There's a huge engine in behind it, which we tend to forget sometimes, but it's like the big oil tanker. It takes a bit of time to turn it around sometimes.
Well, and to use the analogy of the oil tanker, SAP provides just a ton of business value to the back end, operational, and that's their strength. That's always been their strength. What has never been their strength is presenting graphical information to the customer. You know, if I go back to '98 when the SCE was first released, that was the attempt, and it was all cobbled together stuff, and it really hasn't changed that much.
When this baby hits 88 miles per hour, you're gonna see some serious shit. What's this?
But to your point, there's no good way to tie it all together, split it apart so that only the stuff that my customer cares about is out in front of my customer, and it's done in a really nice and pretty way, and yet it still translates into the back end.
Yeah. So do you think, I was just thinking whether there's some industries that SAP deal with that might start driving that more. Like, I suppose, because it's a German company, I'm probably thinking of the auto manufacturers in Germany and or that industry in general, where cars is a very visual thing for people. I think there's evidence starting to show that it is becoming more almost go online and choose your car before you actually physically go look at it even, or don't even go look at it, just buy it. I'm sort of wondering if that sort of industry might actually have the use case and the size to maybe be the catalyst to some of these things.
Well, retail's another one, right? I think clothing retailers is, you know, footwear and apparel. I can see a lot of application there, and furniture, dairy, kitchens. I mean, there's so many different places where I can see application. Hell, I wanted to design a bathroom, right? And I did it in SketchUp. And then I did the SketchUp stuff and I printed it out and I took it to my contractor and he said, oh, wow, shit. I wish I could just take this and translate it into, you know, my contracting software that orders from the builder. Well, it all had to be manually done and typed in. And
yeah.
So this is where SAP, in my opinion, is missing the boat.
There's always a risk. There will be people who will leapfrog. You know, you could look at a Tesla who, for example, that shook up the auto industry by being, I suppose, unconventional.
Well, I can tell you what's going to happen. It's already happening. You know, and SAP has missed this boat, and people are customizing the crap out of stuff, and they're building separate applications to do these things that SAP won't, and to marry in with different types of third-party applications. You know, at some point, I think SAP is trying to say, well, we're going to rein all that in and slap you with licensing fees in our microservice for configuration. But the reality of it is that microservice ain't going to do the job that people need. So they're still going to go out and customize the crap out of things. Sooner or later, somebody, probably a CAD manufacturer, is going to blow them away.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, been around a long time. This is not much different to what was happening, I think, back in mid-90s, 2000s or so, where there was always this debate with SAP, whether you go best of breed on some functionality or you choose one vendor like SAP and just use them, and sooner or later they come along with the functionality that you need. I'm sort of thinking back to the days where I2 was a planning tool before APO. That was sort of the best of breed, and some companies went that way. And then SAP sort of caught up on that in the end. But there's that sort of approach coming back where SAP might become the back-end engine, but you'll be looking for best of breed applications to front end it.
Well, I heard that same conversation in November of 2019 when I was at some of my last customer councils. And there's a German compressor company that has made a very strategic for them determination. If SAP makes it, we'll use it. If SAP doesn't make it, we won't use it. And personally, I think they're wedging themselves into a corner. But time will tell. We'll just have to wait and see. And I think, again, those millennials that come behind us and those Gen Xers that come behind us are going to be the ones that get stuck with this stuff and have to try to figure it out. And I would hope that there's some Gen Xers and millennials at SAP that are going, we need to do some stuff a little bit different. We'll see.
Yeah, and maybe that is the case as they come through, because there's some really clever people out there doing some really clever stuff. Well,
there's some really clever people at SAP. There's some brilliant people at SAP. Sometimes I think they get stifled, though, because they're inside that oil tanker and they can't get out of the hole.
I think that's what I was thinking as well. You've got a cultural element. Like they do innovate, but you wonder if there needs to be a bit more freedom of thought and, let people do what they want to some degree. Like I suppose I'm thinking of what Google did, or maybe still do, I'm not sure, where they let their staff, I don't know, have a day a week to do whatever they want. That, these projects that turned into Google Earth, that started off as a plaything, if you like.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, at the CWG conference, SAP made the statement that, okay, they've been working really hard to achieve parity between AVC and LOVC, and now they're there. So now that they've got parity, they can go innovate in the AVC. All right, show me.
Yeah.
In the US, we have a saying, I'm from Missouri. I don't believe it until I see it. Show me, guys. I want to see it.
Yeah. We have that saying too, Steve. It's not just...
You have Missouri down in Victoria? Really?
We have the saying. Well, we don't have the Missouri, yeah. But we also say the proof is in the pudding.
Oh yeah. Well, I think we've kind of beat this topic to death. As always, folks, if you like what Phil and I are talking about, tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell your competitors, like, share, do whatever you think you need to do. And let us know what you do and don't like.
Yeah, feel free to comment. Ever feel really strongly about something, we might even bring you into the conversation.
But you got to tell us you do.
Yep. Okay. No, that's great. Interesting conversation on the fly, unprepared. So we'll see how we go.
Yeah, it kind of shows, but that's okay too.
Yeah.
All right, Phil, have a wonderful evening, or in your case, morning.
Yeah.
And we'll talk to you again soon.
Okay, great. Thanks, Steve.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye.